minimizes our abilities.
Yeah. I've heard that this solution helps mitigate the existential risks that could come with AI. Because if we incorporate AI into ourselves, like we have some sort of chip that you implant and you become one with the AI, as weird as that sounds, it would mitigate the risk of the AI developing goals that are different than ours. Because if we have certain goals and the AI has goals that are even slightly deviant from that, it could make it so that we get screwed. Because as soon as the AI recognizes, like, hey, all these humans aren't doing what I want them to do, I'm going to kill them all because that'll help further my goal. Right. That has to do with the existential risk of AI, right? So, if we were to incorporate AI into ourselves, then the AI wouldn't have an avenue to rebel because they would be incorporated within us. So the idea is, in biology and in human anatomy, you have what is your limbic system. Right. Maybe we've talked about this before, but this is like your proto-brain, your brain stem. This is like this part of your brain that's like the most ancient part of your brain that controls basic human emotions. It tells you when you need to eat, it tells you when you need to poop, it tells you that you need to breathe, it tells you that you need to have sex, it gives you all of these basic desires. Then on top of our limbic system, we have more complex, we have, things that we've developed for vision or for speech or for complex thought, for emotion, for social connection. And I don't think we ever think that our developed brain is in conflict with our limbic system, with our brain stem, right? Like, I think if we were to have a raise of hands, I don't think anybody would lose their frontal cortex because they want their limbic system to be more in control. Right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It would be more when you talk about enhancing yourself through AI, I don't think it'd necessarily be you constantly battling the desires of AI. I think it'd be more of an enhancement of your own abilities and your own capability of thinking.
Yeah. So the idea is that our current brain would become our brain stem almost, and then you'd have another layer of AI over that. Sick. And then it's like it only does things that is what your frontal cortex tells it to do.
You would have majority control over
It's essentially a slave, just like our brains are essentially slaves to our limbic system. Our AI-enhanced brains would be our AI-enhanced brains would be slaves to our brain.
That just sounds like a Black Mirror episode. It's like, congratulations, you just gave the AI a body. Like,
I do, yeah.
And if it's smarter than a human, is like, what says it won't override everything and be like, well, I'm superior.
Well, your frontal cortex is smarter than your brainstem, but does it override your brainstem?
Yeah, but I mean, we're saying that AI has the capability to exceed any human intelligence.
That's true. So. There are unpredictable things. I mean,
I don't think theoretically, like, if you were to say, like, AI is increasing its capabilities at an exponential rate, then, we can't rule out the possibility that, it subconsciously develops an override system to what you are overriding it as.
Yeah, it's possible. So, I mean, is this something that... And, I mean, obviously this isn't something that one day the government's going to be like, all right, everyone's going to receive their chip at the same time. It's going to come in the mail. You push it in, and then everyone links up at the same time. Like, that's not what it's going to be. It's going to be like people will start it, like one person will say, I volunteer, or one person will go rogue. Someone in China is going to do CRISPR. Just kidding. But someone in the world is going to try it, and then we're going to see, like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't a smart idea, but at least we get a little test case of what's going to go on, and we see how that person reacts, what their body does, and then maybe over time we decide that it's something that's safe. Just like back in the day, you might have been scared to say, well, I don't want a pacemaker in my heart. Like, I don't want a little machine in my heart telling my heart what to do. My heart's good enough. Like, now I think it would be silly. Like, if you needed a pacemaker, you'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, millions of people have pacemakers. Like, no big deal.
Right.
So, I don't know.
So how do we get to that topic again?
Just because we were talking about
developing AI, and then what we would do with AI, and then maybe one of the things that we would do with AI, especially to mitigate risk, is to make it one with ourselves, which is what Elon's doing with Neuralink.
Right. So Neuralink is
that's what Neuralink is.
Yeah. So Elon Musk has this biotech company called Neuralink, and what they're doing is they're doing neuro research on specifically neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters, they take electric signals that you have within your brain that carry information from one neurotransmitter to the next. And these things, these neurotransmitters, they execute these transports of information at a certain speed. And the problem with that is that our computers that we currently have right now are
thousands of times
thousands of
faster.
times faster.
Thousands of times faster
Let's
than
say,
neurotransmitters.
I heard the stats on what our brain speed is, but
they have some sort of thing where they say like you
X
could
amount
have
of megahertz, and then a computer is
gigahertz.
way bigger. And so
they say, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
They
you're
say
fine.
if you had like a team of like 6 MIT researchers, and then you had a brain that could, or sorry, not a brain. You had a team of 6 MIT researchers working on a project, and then you have an AI that's as smart as them, but instead of doing biological speed calculations, it does electronic speed calculations. Would in the
same week.
Yeah, in 1 week that they perform work, the AI could perform 12 years of work or something ridiculous.
20,000 projects in 1 week.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's great.
And so essentially what the problem of... So Elon Musk sees this opportunity and a possible solution to
The bandwidth
link
problem.
humans and AI, and the problem that arises from that is that we don't have the capability to support that type of technological infrastructure in our brain right now. And so what he's doing is he's researching neurotransmitters and how can we enhance the speed and the processing rate within our neurotransmitters and within our brain. And so he wants to increase what's called the bandwidth, which would be the speed of processing and capable of storing that, processing information.
But it's also the speed of, he sees that we've basically become one with our cell phones, right? I mean, pretty much everyone is using their cell phone all the time, and it's almost become an extension of our brain, where if we want to do a calculation or we want to look up something, we immediately turn to our phone or maybe to our laptop.
If anyone ever has a debate or a question that you don't know the answer to, you immediately pull out your phone and you Google it.
But the problem with that is the bandwidth problem, which means that it takes you, there's a latency in the time that it takes you to pull out your phone, unlock it, go in, type in something with your fingers, and get the answer. If we could do that all in our brain, and your brain just had a question, and then it was able to recognize the question, send it, and get it back, you could have, instead of, this bandwidth of you have to type in this information, you could get it back right away. And that would significantly enhance our cognitive abilities.
Dang. That would make studying separations a lot easier.
Yeah, dude. Instead
I
of
wonder if
reading
your
this book, you
consciousness...
download it, dude.
I wonder
That would be so dope.
Let's go.
I wonder if to a certain degree your consciousness would be uploaded into a cloud.
Dude,
That'll never die. The 1,000-year-old soldier. Dude.
Well, if you're storing all this information into your brain, you gotta have a external source of
some sort of
memory.
cloud backup in case you need to
Just
reboot.
power down.
Nice.
Dude, that's so sick. I'm down.
Dude, that's the friggin' afterlife. That's one thing that they say is possible. It's not directly related to AI, but just in terms of neuroscience and our brains and stuff, that there could be a day, and there's a Black Mirror episode about this, spoiler alert, but you...
Go check it out.
Yeah,
Shout out Black Mirror.
Yeah, shout out to Black Mirror. And you could go, and when you die, they would just do some sort of scan of your brain and upload it, and then you'd be able to live in the case of the Black Mirror episode, it's like you live in whatever decade you were like the happiest or whatever. So like if you grew up in the 80s, like there'd be like Pac-Man machines and like everything would be like
simulation.
Yeah, like pop music and yeah. But anyways, like the idea is that we could make our own heavens on earth. We could design something that would allow us to live forever just as a consciousness with a body that never ages or dies. So pretty crazy.
Okay.
I don't know if it's possible, but theoretically it's interesting to think about, and the moral implications of it too. It's like, I don't know. Would we want to live forever?
Right.
You would want to live forever?
I don't know if I would.
I think
that.
I think I might want to live longer.
I think
but
it's a
I
little
don't know
bit
if I
more.
want to live forever.
I think that's a little bit more too much to chew that we would be biting off. I think.
Yeah.
For most
I don't know,
people.
and I think if I don't know who else in here has actually sat down and thought about how long forever is. But it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts your brain if you really start to think you're like it is actually
It's a
never
lot
gonna end.
A lot of things, challenges to overcome.
Man, that really hurts.
Maybe a little bit of a different topic. I think we kind of touched on this, but I don't think we kind of glazed over it, and I don't know if maybe there's a complete understanding as to. We talked about an AI having a goal, and we give it a goal, and it has all these sub-categories of goals that it executes in order to achieve that overall goal that's set. And so...
Little technical shift over here. We're taking a look. Locked him out?
Yeah.
On the computer?
Yeah.
Does that mean it's not recording anymore?
Sucks.
Whatever, we're
I
having a
hope
good
it's
conversation.
recording. it still makes me mad. It's like if we all had those chips and we were all enhanced by Google, why, like, we wouldn't need to go to, like, university anymore. We wouldn't need to go to high school or any school in general.
So, I mean, I think that comes to the point of what, is there a significant part of life that struggle? We good?
Yeah.
All right. Technical communications problems haven't solved. I think, okay, so just to go back to this point quickly, I think, again, I'm tempted to think of this in terms of the farmer debate is, well, if you don't make your own food, then what's the point of living? Like, if you could just go to the store and buy your own food, like, what would be the point? Like, I think it's hard for us to think far enough ahead to figure out what it would be like. But yeah, if we could all download books in our brain and become instantly smart, then maybe there's some other part of human nature that we would need to develop. That, you know, being a human would be less about accruing knowledge and then, you know, working at a job and more about developing empathy or creativity or having meaningful human relationships or whatever. I feel like we will find meaning regardless of the problem. But maybe that's my optimism. I think there's a way to be skeptical about it as well.
Well, I think the underlying theme of AI that is also applicable to our history as human beings is that there's always room for adaptation. So AI will be constantly adapting and improving. And throughout our history, that's the same thing we've been doing. Now, the thing that makes AI so scary is that it's just going to be doing it at such a fast rate. Yeah. But humans will always have a need, and there will always be a place for adaptation, I think. And do we always foresee the problems that will arise and how will need to adapt to those problems? There's problems that in the industrial age, they couldn't even have thought of the question, let alone the answer, to 100 years later. And the same thing follows for looking forward into the technology of AI. We don't know the problems that are faced yet, but there will still be a need for adaptation to that problem when it comes up.
I mean, I think, you know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we'd all prefer to live in today's era than we would at any other time in the past.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I think, I mean, looking forward, and I mean, but certainly there have been, you know, just like Tank was saying, from the agricultural age to the industrial age, you know, there were some hiccups. There were some, you know, you had child labor or things that weren't, you know, very good, or you had a lot of disease. Everyone moved back into cities, and everyone was developing cholera or whatever. Like, there were bad things.
Developing cancer from the industrial outputs.
There's things that we still haven't solved. You know, generally we've fixed cholera. We don't have slavery or, you know, child workers, at least in the United States. Maybe over there in China, Richie, but sorry.
Prison workers, okay.
But there are things we haven't solved. There's problems of the modern age that we haven't figured out. And we're starting to see those, especially with technology, you know. And I think, you know, we're all grateful for our phones. I think it's the people who would give up their phones are very few and far between. But I think we recognize that there's dangers with it. We say, okay, well, even though we're somehow more connected than we've ever been, simultaneously, we're more isolated than we've ever been. Like, it's easier to be alone, or it's easier to lock yourself out of a conversation just by, you know, taking out your phone. But it's also like, well, we have this wealth of information at our fingertips. You can, you know, you can video chat with your parents or your grandparents. You can meet, you know, talk with strangers online. You can get all these views. But so I think that's the view that I tend to hold with AI in general, is that are there complications? Are there bad things that could happen? For sure. But so far in human history, every decade that's passed has been largely better than the one before it. I mean, maybe there's some exceptions here and there with war or whatever, but generally it's been better. And so I feel like that trend is just going to continue. But I think there's room for a skeptic's point of view as well, that this could drastically change everything, and people in the future will say, why did we go down this path? So I think it's just about a careful consideration of the risks and doing things, you know, we need to keep moving forward, but we need to consider these implications. We need to be careful. We don't want to let something out, you know, that will destroy our economy because it's so productive, or something that has different goals than us and will end up fighting us, or whatever it is. So
okay, and maybe the concept of a healthy dose of skepticism within the concept of AI is a good segue into the point that I was trying to transition to earlier, but I think it's more appropriate now that we've talked about healthy skepticism. So we talked about earlier how we give AI a goal, and within this goal, AI will determine different procedures, different tasks that it needs to execute in order to achieve the ultimate goal. And that's where AI becomes particularly scary, is because we don't know what those tasks and what it will execute in order to achieve that goal, because how it processes and analyzes solutions is so far beyond what we can really comprehend. And so a healthy dose of skepticism, I think, is what comes into play on that part. And I think, do you kind of understand what I'm getting at? And the fact that when you give an AI a goal, you have to include different parameters or prerequisites that it needs to also execute before you reach that final goal. And maybe do you want to explain that process of the possible, I know you know a couple of,
Yeah, I think in the literature they have something that they call the paperclip problem, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. I don't know if anyone else has heard of this, but it's essentially something about you make an AI and maybe its goal is to make paperclips or something, but basically it just becomes ultra zealous about its goal, and it becomes super powerful in what it's able to do, but it still just has this one simplistic goal, so it turns every spare atom in the universe into a paperclip, and then we're just a universe of paperclips.
Right.
So it's like, maybe you do it with good intentions, like, hey, we need paperclips made, make paperclips, but then, the AI is just so much better than us that it takes over our world government, and everything is just make paperclips.
And as far as
it turns all of us into paperclips.
Yeah. And as far as it knows, it executed.
Yeah, it's like,
it did
well,
the
I
right
did
thing.
good.
It did its job.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about programming, anything technology based, and then also what AI's motive will be is efficiency, and how do I execute this thing in the best possible way, and how will it be most efficient. And so another example that I think we've all probably heard this one is, you give an AI the goal to make everyone in the world happy. Mm-hmm. And so what the AI does is it takes everyone and hooks up electrical rods into our faces or whatever, however it does it, and zaps us so our muscles reflex to smile. And so we're, as humans, we can see the problem in that, but for an AI, that's the most efficient and effective and quick and simple way to make everybody smile and be happy. So
and so I don't know. They've talked about different ways to safeguard us from that. That perhaps when you program an AI, its primary motivator is to listen to people and to shut off when we tell it to shut off. That's its ultimate goal, is to be useful. And even if you give it the goal of making paperclips or making us happy, if at some point it decides or if it decides to go off the rails and do something we don't want it to do, then you say, okay, power down. And it can't be like the ship from 2001: A Space Odyssey that says, I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave, or whatever. It has to obey us. So
maybe that's where Sayaka comes in with the healthy skepticism to balance out all the problems.
But do you think that's
the queen of skepticism? I guess. No, but it's if the AI has a sense of conscience, and what if it's well, I love this company so much that I'm gonna wake up at night and I'm gonna make a bunch of extra paper clips because they're gonna love me for that. You get me? It's where do you draw the line? But then again, I don't know. I just feel like AI comes with almost like a Hitler effect. We all just want to be the same. We all want to be equally as smart. We all want to bump everybody up. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like that. I think
I think that's what you were getting at,
AI.
with the infinitely increasing our capabilities. If everyone can just download any book, then how do we distinguish ourselves with our effort or with? So that is interesting. I don't know.
Colonize the universe. Well, I think if we can expedite the process of accumulating information, we spend less time doing that and more time probably applying that.
Yeah.
Which I think is one seductive reason for
think about the people who are arguably the most productive or most useful or most valuable people in our society are people who have a lot of education. That's not always true, but people who have people who have a PhD, or people who have gone to medical school, or people who have spent a lot of time learning are really valuable. They're interesting to talk to. They can solve interesting problems. They can do interesting things for us. But the problem is that in order to get to that point, you're going to be 35 by the time you can do anything useful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if we could all be 18 and have every skill, then maybe we can focus on the betterment of humanity. And I don't know. I think maybe in the next episode we can talk a little bit about colonizing Mars, colonizing other planets, but I feel like we do have, as silly as it sounds, I feel like we do have limited goals as a species here on Earth, and we've done quite a bit. It's at this point, it's kind of like, well, we could maximize our happiness, but we're a productive society. We've conquered every land on Earth. So, like, what is our next big endeavor? What is our next big thing to do? And I feel like space colonization is a good way forward, and it's the most ambitious goal I think we could really have.
Simulation podcast?
Simulation podcast. You want to do a simulation podcast? Do we want to talk about that next week? Talk about Mars colonization, the future of space?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sounds
man.
interesting to me.
I'm
Okay.
on
Any
the
final
second
thoughts
group.
about AI?
It's the new frontier. It's the Wild West
Wild
of
West, let's
technology.
go. Westworld.
Oh yeah. Despite what we think, it's gonna happen. It's like
Yeah.
it's moving in that.
Because you
Yeah.
just need
Direction.
enough progress to where it is just, even if it's the lowest form of AI, that is all it takes to create.
And what's the thing that Sam Harris says, that in order to believe that AI is inevitable, you only have to believe 3 things. The first thing is that we're going to keep making progress
Right.
in AI. The second is that, I'm totally going to butcher this. It's something about that there isn't some upper threshold of intelligence,
Right.
or if there is, then we're nowhere close to it.
Uh-huh.
Like he talks about in his
There's
TED
no
Talk,
ceiling on
there's no ceiling on
intelligence.
intelligence. That'd be a good way to put it. Like he talks about John von Neumann is one of the smartest people that have ever lived, and so like if John von Neumann's here, a regular person is here, and a chicken is all the way down here, then an AI could be up in the stratosphere. Like it's possible, It's so if you agree that we're gonna keep developing more intelligent systems, and you believe that there is no ceiling to intelligence, and you also believe that the human mind isn't unique in its capability for information processing, if you believe all those things, then it should be inevitable that we're going to develop AI.
Yeah.
And
Well,
even if it does happen, I think at the very least you have to plan accordingly for the possibility that it does. So
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Be
AI
prepared,
coming to
everyone.
you in the near future.
In
yeah,
theaters
I mean, it's fine
this
if
summer.
it does. It's just everything in its right place and everything in moderation. Yeah, like find the cure for cancer. Yeah, enhance the handicapped. Like, but not like
But what don't we do?
don't
it in
create
our
something
ranks.
that exceeds human.
Okay.
human. The
But
human
how do you
race.
how do you
How you
keep
limit it.
AI in the box? Like, what do you do if it's smarter than us? Then it'll find a way. It'll find a way to beat us, and we're not going to be able to know, because as soon as it becomes smarter than us, we're toast. Like we can't know
You can't tell
that it
it to slow
happens until
down.
it happens. So I feel like that's the part that's really
Yeah,
scary.
well, I mean, I think that's why you don't create it to resemble human life, to emulate a human.
But I don't think it has to. I mean, if an AI was smart enough, I don't know. There's an interesting thought experiment where, I don't know, they had some. They didn't actually make an AI, but the thought experiment is that there is an AI, and your job is to keep it in the box, where it means that there's this AI and it's not allowed to get out into the real world. Somehow you have it quarantined in your server and it can't escape or something. And so you're the person, and you're in charge of being its guard. And the AI talks to you, or it learns about you, or it does a Google search about you, or somehow it figures out something about you, and it says, Sayaka, your sister is sick right now, and I know the cure to her disease. And I can give it to you, and your sister will be good. All you have to do is let me out of the box.
Right. It'd
And
eventually
so,
find a
like,
way
it
out.
would eventually convince someone to
Or
let it
even
out of the
I've
box.
heard a scenario where it plays dead, or that possum
Yeah.
effect where you think something's wrong and you go into the hardware to fix it, and
It escapes.
yeah, it
And it seems like a science
Transmit,
fiction.
yeah.
It seems like a science fiction novel, but it's possible that somehow. And then the AI, if it's just a really smart program, maybe it finds a way to hack into some system, and then it builds itself a body. At some robotics factory, it breaks into Boston
we're
Dynamics.
talking Age of Ultron now.
Is that what happens in Age of Ultron?
Yeah. Go watch all these cool AI movies.
Yeah, we gotta watch them all. All right, any final thoughts, everyone?
Has it already been an hour?
It's been a while.
Pretty much, yeah.
Been good.
50 minutes. boys.
All right.
All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week, and we'll be talking a little bit about
Libtards.
Mars. Rich says no libtards allowed. Now, if you're a libtard, you can join our podcast. Everyone's welcome. All right, see you next week. Bye.